James Gunn's Superman, after a several years long wait, has finally released to the public, and we've all seen the film. Was it everything we hoped for? Is it the perfect start to a new universe? Well, I'm Josh from Just MASH. Let's figure it out. So, just outright to say it, as both a comic book fan and a movie fan, I loved this film. I think James Gunn did a phenomenal job with Superman, and perhaps has given us the best live-action Superman in movies. I just watched all of the other Superman films leading up to this one, so I've kind of got them all fresh in my mind. And honestly, this film has given me specifically what I've wanted to see out of a Superman film more than any of the other ones. First, I'll talk about the actors and the performances. David Corenswet is the perfect Superman. I'm someone who believes that we haven't had a bad Superman in live action. Christopher Reeve, Brandon Routh, Henry Cavill, they've all been great in my eyes. But Corenswet brings a different sort of vibe to the film. I think when you look at Christopher Reeve's performance, he was very, very specific about having a completely different Clark Kent from Superman. Clark Kent is this person that means well, but he's kind of a bumbling fool, whereas Superman is this person who is completely sure of himself and solid and the perfect specimen. Henry Cavill's Superman doesn't really have a Clark Kent. He's pretty much Superman the entire way through. He's more charming as Clark Kent than he is as Superman necessarily, but it just doesn't feel like he made much of an effort, or maybe the film makes much of an effort to kind of distinguish between the two. Corenswet does have a difference between his Clark Kent and his Superman, but Clark Kent isn't this strange weirdo that no one would pay attention to. He actually feels like a normal dude. And when he plays Superman, it doesn't feel like he's playing this untouchable god. It also feels like he's a normal dude. Rachel Brosnahan was the perfect Lois Lane. She brings the attitude and also the sweet, sincere vibes that Lois Lane has. She's a nice person, but she's also someone who's going to say what she thinks, and she's going to push when she feels like she needs an answer. Nicholas Hoult, who's been one of my favorite actors for a long time, absolutely killed the role of Lex Luthor. To me, without a doubt, he is the best Lex Luthor that we've ever had, and honestly, it's not even close. I like Gene Hackman. I don't necessarily like Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. Jesse Eisenberg is a whole other thing, and we don't talk about the other guy. Something that this version of Superman absolutely nails compared to the other versions of Superman is the science fiction tone. The original Superman films, they were kind of held back by their budget, and by the time they were made, of course, they really transcended what films were able to do back then and made you believe a man could fly. But ultimately, they still didn't have that punch that most modern films can have just with CGI. Man of Steel does lean into the sci-fi aspects of Superman with the beginning and Krypton and the implosion of it and all that. But most of the film, it's set on Earth, and it just feels kind of like a normal action movie. This film feels like Superman comic books to me. There's crazy superpowers, there's other superpowered beings and heroes, there's pocket universes, there's alien babies, there's a bunch of crazy sci-fi nonsense that feels right at home in a Superman film. Another thing that I really loved about this film is the in-depth Superman lore that they kind of went into. We learned more about the Daily Planet and the people that work at the Daily Planet. We also learned more about Clark Kent and his philosophy on journalism. We saw Jimmy Olsen with a more expanded role, and we saw him and Lois Lane doing investigative journalism. We also saw Krypto the Superdog for the first time, which, as a kid growing up watching Cartoon Network, the Krypto the Superdog cartoon was one of my favorites. So it was really cool to see him in live action and being fun and kicking ass. Spending so much time at the Fortress of Solitude was cool. There are some things about Superman's lore and backstory that do get changed, and I haven't quite figured out how I feel about those things yet, but that's just something you'll have to see for yourself. Two of the most important things about Superman that this film gets right are actually his relationship with other people. His dynamic with Lois Lane is perfect in this film. They're opposites in who they are as people, but they work so well together. There's a fine line to balance when it comes to ethics of journalism, and Lois Lane being married to Superman kind of blurs those lines a bit, but they really analyze that in the film and what it means for them to be a couple. The other important one for me is the relationship between Superman and Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is not a supervillain because he loves to be evil and do bad things. He's a supervillain because of his hatred for Superman. One of my favorite moments in comic books comes from All-Star Superman, when Lex Luthor says to Superman, "I could have saved the world if it wasn't for you." And Superman replies with, "Lex, you could have saved the world years ago if it mattered to you." This film perfectly captures that dynamic between Superman and Lex Luthor. Ideally, in our world, Lex Luthor could be the person to save the world. He's a genius, he's rich, he could figure out the solution to any problem. He's someone that we would idolize. But the second a superpowered alien landed on the planet and started saving people, no one would ever look Lex Luthor's way again. That's the ultimate rejection, and for someone who's had everything their entire life, the ultimate cause for hatred. Something interesting about this film is, the opening kind of tells us where we are exactly in the timeline of the DC universe. And being the intro to this DC universe, it kind of has a lot to do. But it's weird because this film kind of feels like a sequel to a movie that doesn't exist. We land in an established metropolis. We land in an established relationship between Superman and Lois Lane. There are other superheroes like Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, Metamorpho, and Hawkgirl, and we know Superman's relationship with these characters. Lex Luthor already hates Superman. He already has a plan to defeat Superman, and we're seeing that in action right as the film begins. I'm torn on this way of filmmaking and introducing you to characters. I understand the idea of we don't need to see Superman land on Earth from Krypton as a baby and watch the planet explode. But at the same time, Superman the movie was, 40, 50 years ago? Superman Returns was 2006. Even Man of Steel was 2013. If you're a kid born 8 years ago, way after Man of Steel, you might have never seen Superman's origin before. Every film is somebody's first, so while part of me agrees, let's just get into the action, I also do feel like you're being held back a bit by not seeing this Superman's intro. A good comparison point for me is the MCU Spider-Man. We know Peter Parker was bit by the spider. We know Uncle Ben died defending someone. We know with great power comes great responsibility. But we never saw that in the MCU. We never saw that with Tom Holland. And because of that, that's why it feels like every MCU Spider-Man film ends with a new origin story. It even took them like 6 films to get to with great power comes great responsibility in Spider-Man No Way Home. If they had just simply shown us the origin of Spider-Man in Homecoming, it might not have taken so long for him to feel like a fully fleshed out Spider-Man. Now, is this the issue with the Superman? I don't know. We'll have to see later. Right now, I don't necessarily feel like it, but I do think it sets a dangerous precedent moving forward with the DCU. A benefit to this being an established universe, though, was the introduction to the other superheroes. We didn't have to take too much time to learn about Green Lantern or Mr. Terrific or Hawkgirl. It was cool to see a universe that was already familiar with them. We didn't have to get an origin and an intro for each character. And that makes it easier for future projects for other characters to show up and be introduced to them as well. At the end of the day, both as a comic book fan and a film fan, like I said, I really loved this movie. I think James Gunn is a phenomenal filmmaker, a very talented writer, and sometimes he's a dude that likes to take big swings, and sometimes they pay off in a big way. And like I said, there are changes to Superman's lore in this film that might not work for everybody. But I feel like James Gunn has really understood Superman and his mythos and how to create this world. Knowing that he's at the helm for the future of the DCU in general makes me excited. It's cool to be excited as a DC fan. It's frankly not an emotion we've had for a very long time at this point, especially in the film space. So I'm excited to see what James Gunn has in store for the future. So if you've seen Superman, let me know in the comments what you think of it. I personally loved it, but of course I'm open to all opinions as long as we're respectful. But with that, I've been Josh from Just MASH. Until next time.